Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview alongside Scott Richey. I'm Aren. A lot of great basketball, including an amazing Lincoln Lanphier game that went into overtime last week. Neil Alexander didn't quite get his 700th win, but he did eventually get it the other day. But between Lincoln and Lanphier, the number one, number two teams in 3A, it didn't disappoint, went to overtime, and a really good game that lived up to the hype.
Yeah, and there was a lot of hype leading up to it, and based on the number of pictures I saw of people streaming out after the game was over, a lot of people made it out to that game. Lincoln kind of proved that they can play with a team like Lanphier that's going to try and push the ball as much as possible, and play just a completely opposite style of Lincoln's, more methodical offense and defense. So I mean, and a loss to Lanphier, it shouldn't it's not a killer for Lincoln. And even they came back the next night and lost at Champaign Central, which was probably a letdown for them, but probably was just a continuation of the letdown from the loss to Lanphier. But Central is playing a lot better with Wayne McLean as coach this year. But the Railers did get Neil Alexander's 700th win on Monday against Taylorville, so that's out of the way. Now they can just focus on winning, just because winning's better.
Moving on to MacArthur, who won the Constellation Championship for the Turkey Tournament. They won the Constellation Tournament for the Collinsville Holiday Tournament. They've won 4 straight, but they got a really tough schedule coming up for this next week. Kind of 3 of the top teams in the Big 12 between Bloomington, Centennial, and Normal West, who they've all played before. Normal Community being that 4th one, that's kind of one of those top teams, and it should be interesting to see how MacArthur does in a stretch where they really could make a move and kind of prove that they can beat some of the upper echelon teams. So it's been close so far. They just haven't quite got over the hump.
And it's been really close for MacArthur. In the 4 Big 12 games that they have lost so far this year, it's all been by a maximum of 4 points. And MacArthur is 11 points total from those games, from being 12-2 on the season, and just the whole year just having a different look. And the other losses, to East St. Louis and to McClure North and Collinsville, weren't by a ton of points either. So it's just they need to maybe figure out, and maybe they have figured out because they played a lot better in their 4-win streak, of how to finish off some games and pull away, because they have definitely have the talent to pull away and put some of these teams away.
Yeah, I think they have kind of 2 different teams that they can put on the floor if they want speed, if they want. I think they're always kind of that transition team, but they have so many different elements you can kind of put in there. But I feel like with the Eisenhower game and with the last couple of games of that Collinsville tournament, they're winning by 20 plus points and really putting teams away. That they have that depth where those guys that are playing that are coming off the bench are still just as effective against the other teams, the opponent's benches, the stars are against the starters. So I think they've been able to find ways to really pull away from those games, and they won a close game against Southeast. Maybe that's as far as kind of getting over the hump and beating like a Bloomington or a Centennial in some of those close games. I think that's kind of what they need to do. And for Centennial, a team like Centennial, they had a big guy, Michael Finke, 6'9". MacArthur, they'll have a hard time. They don't really have a big guy they can put underneath against him. So they want to keep that game going quickly. I think that's kind of the key to getting some of these wins, is just pushing the pace and not letting Centennial get set to where Finke sets up in the post and has a nice little baby hook to where he gets those points. But if MacArthur can pick up 2-3 wins here, that'll be really big in this next week.
And they just need to prove that they can put teams away in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Because this year's start in conference play was a lot like last year's start, where they just came out and really didn't do anything. And if they're going to be a team that wins a regional, be a team that competes for a sectional, maybe wins a sectional, they've got to be a team that competes and beats teams in their own conference. And this next stretch with Bloomington, Centennial, West, and Community, which they'll get their first look at Community after being snowed out the first time, this is when it happens. If it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen this year.
And you get the feeling from watching MacArthur that they have the talent to win a regional. I felt like last year, it was definitely a possibility, but they would go in these stretches where there would be long periods where things wouldn't go well and they kind of let teams get back in. And I don't get that feeling this year. I really feel like they're putting teams away. And they're playing 11, 12 guys sometimes, and they can find different combinations, and I feel like MacArthur this year does feel like they have the talent to kind of get that regional championship.
I guess we'll see in the next week if they can continue just playing the really good basketball that they have the last 4 days.
So we got MacArthur, and as far as the OCA boys, you kind of have your top teams in St. T and Warrensburg, but there are quite a few teams that have been playing really well lately. I think probably Monticello being one of those teams where they've won I think 4 straight now, and they've had a nice little run here after a tough start to the season. Yeah,
and it's kind of a little crowded at the top of the OCA boys conference standings. St. T is undefeated right now and leading the way, but there's Warrensburg, Sullivan, Monticello, and Tuscola are all 3-1, and I feel like there's potential there for an upset. St. T is obviously going to be the favorite with Christian Williams on the court, and some of the other players really kind of stepping up their game around him, which I think is really important. Yeah. So it's just not all on his shoulders. Although, if I believe he can handle that load, but they're going to win a little easier if Jordan Lakaitis, Masson Velchak, John Radley, George Duncan, if those guys are contributing what they can contribute. But still, Monticello, like you said, has won 4 in a row, and just won a game against Sloan Unity where Nick Stokowski was not their leading scorer, which when he hasn't been the leading scorer or has not played as well earlier in the year, that's a game Monticello wasn't going to win. But Noah Freeman, a sophomore, played really well against Unity. McLean Stahl, another senior who's really kind of getting his first varsity run this year after being behind Matt Cruz and Brian Phipps. He had a career high in points against Unity. And if those two continue to play pretty well, Nick Stokowski's going to do what Nick Stokowski does. They have a chance to really kind of turn around what was a dreadful start and finish the year on a stronger note. And then with Tuscola, it seems like if a Bates has a big game, that they're going to do pretty well. Nick Bates has some really incredible games. Zach Bates was kind of doing it early before Nick took over in the last few games. But they have probably surpassed what I thought was going to be possible for a team that's I saw last year as probably still going to be in a rebuilding phase this year. And Sullivan is in the same boat, really. They had their leading scorer back from last year. It was Nick Frericks, and he only scored 7 points a game last year. But he has played well. Derek Stain has played incredibly well for a guy that played varsity ball last year, but didn't score more than 4 points a game. And then Ty Molson, he's a sophomore, is in kind of the same boat as Stain, where guys that are getting more playing time and doing some pretty good things with it.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the fun time of the year where early on, a lot of St. T. Warrensburg players were back. Those guys had a lot of experience, and then you have someone like Noah Freeman from Monticello, who's a sophomore. Nick Bates is a sophomore. And you really start to see those teams start to grow up a little bit, and once they hit that OCA conference play, really start to understand how to play with each other and really develop. Nick Bates has been incredible from all over the floor, especially behind the three-point line as well. I think he's going to be a superstar in this league in a couple of years, if not next year or even this year. He's had a couple 30-point games already, so.
And he'll be a superstar in the CIC.
Oh, true.
So, which is going to take some getting used to, because still, it's going to happen next year whether we think it should or not. But he's going to be one of the top players, football, basketball-wise, in the conference.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see if Monticello or Tuscola or Sullivan can crack into that top 2 and how they can compete with Warrensburg or St. Teresa. It should be interesting to see how those teams match up. And this weekend we have the OCA girls conference tournament coming up. Starts Saturday, and kind of your usual suspects. All these teams will play each other. They all know each other very well. You have A&M at the 1, Clinton's the 2 seed, Sullivan 3, and Murrow 4. And I really feel like those 4, and really, those 3 have kind of separated themselves. Murrow has played A&M very closely the last couple of times, but those 4 teams, all very good teams, coming this weekend.
It's interesting, because Sullivan is a 3 seed right now. They have beaten A&M. Right. They have beaten Clinton, although they also lost to Clinton. So they kind of go in as the underdog because of seeding, but have to be considered one of the favorites too because they have wins against the top 2 seeds. It should make for an interesting tournament with, I think, any of those three, has potential to win that thing.
Yeah, and if those top seeds all win, A&M will play Maroa, who they've beaten, I think, by a total of 8 points in the 2 games. And then Clinton and Sullivan, who have each beat, they beat each other once already. Clinton had a pretty big win the second time around, but so a lot of good rematches. But you have all these teams that like playing a up-tempo offense, and I think A&M's maybe their press might separate them a little bit. They can trap a lot of teams that don't have necessarily good point guard, but the other 3 teams all have really good point guards, and Brenna Fink and Emily Newhouser and Haley Tuhill. All those teams will be able to work around it a little bit, but still A&M. I don't know if I guess you have to put them as the number 1 seed. I think Clinton is real close too. But really should be a fun tournament to see how that all plays out, considering a lot of those teams play the same style and they've played each other so many times already.
Yeah, and kind of the preliminary games will happen before Saturday and the top seeds play. And, you don't want to rule out an upset. But, what happened Monday, when A&M and Clinton and Sullivan all played, some conference games, and all 3 were just incredible blowouts. It puts those 3 really on a different level. Yeah. And they all kind of did it, different ways. A&M, allowed 35 points to St. Teresa in the game and had 31 itself after 1 quarter, so you're doing something right there. Sullivan, had double-doubles from Britton Boyer, Melissa Stewart. And Clinton faced a little adversity, trailed Argenna 9-0 early in the first quarter and was still trailing at the end, and then ultimately came back and put 30 on them in the third quarter. So they turned things around. And it's just, they're kind of at this other level that the rest of the OCA isn't. And Maroa, is right there. As you kind of said, they've played A&M, really close a couple games. And just, if they could get, one, win against, I mean, it's going to be tough because I probably play A&M again. They would prefer to see, Sullivan or Clinton. Sure. But, they're just right there, and they need a big win to kind of push themselves, past kind of this plateau they're on right now.
Now we're talking about all these games. Hopefully they still get played. We keep getting snow days every week, and so if there's no more basketball and you're just hurting for time, go back and check our old press preview videos if you need some basketball. Your fix. But for the rest of the week, hopefully these games go on. Check it back at hrpreps.com. We'll have our pick'em that continues to go on, and I think Justin's still doing pretty well on that, so make sure you get out and try to beat him there. But like I said, hopefully these games get played, and we'll see you out there.